BJ Mafia, what's pop? So if you go back to the time when the Boston Celtics had drafted both Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, they've been one of the most consistent winning organizations in the National Basketball Association over these last couple of seasons. And the Boston Celtics, prior to last year, they had been to 2 Eastern Conference Finals with their 2 young superstars, and they finally got over the hump last year, winning last year's Eastern Conference, advancing to the finals, and taking the eventual Golden State Warrior champions to 6 games in last year's NBA Finals. And while the Boston Celtics had an extremely impressive offseason, grabbing Danilo Gallinari prior to him going down with his ACL injury, and then going to acquire Malcolm Brogdon, this team has been extremely impressive for a majority of the season. And while the Boston Celtics are currently in a slump right now, this is not just going to be a slump right now. This Boston Celtics team is going to fail in this year's postseason, and I'm going to talk about that in today's video. Now, getting into the first topic, the first reason why the Boston Celtics team is going to fail in this year's postseason is because we've seen this team be vulnerable throughout the majority of this season. Now, while the Boston Celtics currently are the number 2 seed in the Eastern Conference with a record of 49-23, they are 7-6 since the All-Star break, and I will give them a little bit of a cushion because Robert Williams has been out with a hamstring injury since March 3rd. He's expected to return tonight versus the Sacramento Kings. And he's obviously a big piece to what the Boston Celtics do, especially their identity on the defensive side of the ball and on the interior. And this Boston Celtics team has been extremely vulnerable on a multitude of occasions. They are consistently losing to teams below 500. And yes, if you want to flip it and keep that same energy saying that they're consistently beating teams above 500, I will give you that. But take a look at some of these teams that the Boston Celtics have struggled against. Some of these teams are below 500. They just blew a 19-point lead the other night versus the tanking Utah Jazz without Jordan Clarkson, without Colin Sexton. They are 1-3 this season versus the Orlando Magic, who won those games pretty comfortably for the most part. Then you look, they're 1-3 versus the New York Knicks, and the Knicks just have their number. They have a defensive identity versus the Boston Celtics. They know how to match up well against them, and one of those games was without Jalen Brunson. And then you move forward, they are also 1-3 versus the Cleveland Cavaliers, one of the best defensive teams in basketball, number 1 in defensive rating in the NBA this season, and they also just lost to the Houston Rockets the other night with Jason Tatum and both Jaylen Brown out of the court. And while yes, the Boston Celtics are top 5 in offensive and defensive efficiency, they are number 4 in points per game, they are number 7 in 3-point percentage, number 3 in free throw percentage, number 7 on opponent points per game, number 5 in opponent field goal percentage, and number 8 in opponent 3-point percentage. This Boston Celtics team is extremely deep, they're very well constructed, but at the end of the day, you cannot show this level of vulnerability consistently in a night out basis. While I love their depth and I love the pieces that they have around their 2 young superstars, there's still something going wrong with this team. Now getting into the next topic, the second reason why the Boston Celtics will fail in this year's postseason is because of Jason Tatum. Now, I am personally of the mindset that Jason Tatum is a top 5 player in basketball. He is a young, transcendent superstar and one of the young faces of the NBA. But Jason Tatum, like every player, has his flaws, and Jason Tatum, a lot of his flaws were shown in last year's postseason. Now, taking a look at Tatum's numbers from this season, in 67 games, he's averaging 39-5 on 45, 34, and 86% split with a PER of a 23.2, and a lot of these are career highs across the board from Jason Tatum. My issue with Jason Tatum is a level of inconsistency. While he still is having an MVP campaign in a normal season, Jason Tatum on a night in and night out basis does not consistently show up when I need him to the most, and I'm talking about specifically in crunch time. And while Jason Tatum does have his big moments and he has hit his clutch shots over the years, and yes, even some this season, Jason Tatum still finds himself coming up short on a lot of occasions. Now, when you look at the clutch advanced stats and you look at what Jason Tatum has or has not done in this year's games, in 14 potential games, in the last minute of a game, down 3 or more, or they're up 3 or more in a 1-possession game, essentially. Jason Tatum ranks 18 among qualified players in this category, 7 of 15 from the field, 1 of 4 from 3, and still 4 turnovers. Turnovers have consistently been an issue, and that was an arising issue in the postseason last year. And the Boston Celtics are also 4-7 this season in overtime games. While not all of that needs to be placed onto Jason Tatum's shoulders, a lot of that blame should be, because if you are a top 5 player, you are a young transcendent superstar, you need to be able to take the games over more often than not, and I have not seen that enough from Jason Tatum. And yes, Jaylen Brown sometimes gets the last shot, and sometimes he takes over the game. Sometimes I see Al Horford and Grant Williams or Marcus Smart taking last-minute shots in the game, in the clutch. I do not need to see that on a consistent basis, and I need to see Jason Tatum with the ball in his hands more often than not in crunch time. And just a couple of ones that I can think of off the top of my head that are notable right now are when Marcus Smart and Al Horford were saving the Celtics in the late game in the fourth quarter versus the New York Knicks, hitting big three after big three after big three. And then you also go back to that primetime television game versus the Sixers. Jason Tatum gets the inbound, pulls up at the top of the key, hits the big three to win the game. That was an incredible game, incredible shot by him. But then he also goes and blows a wide open opportunity and layup at the rim versus the Houston Rockets. I get it. You're not going to make every shot. You're not going to get every opportunity. You're not going to get every look. But if he is that guy, and I believe he is that guy, he needs to start taking over games and putting the onus on himself to say, give me the damn ball. And the last point I want to drive home with Jason Tatum, like I mentioned in last year's postseason, in 24 games last year in the postseason, Jason Tatum's numbers look pretty damn good. 25, 6, and 6 on 43, 39, 80 splits. But the problem was he had 100 turnovers in last year's postseason. I believe, if memory serves me correctly, that is the most by one player in an NBA postseason in history. But then when you get to the NBA Finals, Jason Tatum, while he did struggle in last year's Finals when they took the Warriors to 6 games, Jaylen Brown was the best player in that series for the Boston Celtics. Jason Tatum's numbers in the NBA Finals last year, 21, 7, and 6 on 37, 45, 65 splits. He was a minus 21 in that series, and he had 23 turnovers in that series alone. Now getting into the last topic, the last point I want to drive home as to why the Boston Celtics will fail in this year's postseason is because of head coach Joe Mazzulla. Now, while Joe Mazzulla did start the season off as the interim head coach and he's been officially hired as this year's head coach, to me that was premature. They needed to wait to see what Joe Mazzulla was going to do in this year's postseason. And while Ime Udoka did take this team in his first season to the NBA Finals, we cannot just expect that out of Joe Mazzulla, especially when he is a rookie head coach. There is plenty of great teams in the Eastern Conference, and I've seen Joe Mazzulla be reluctant to make necessary changes in late game situations. For some reason, he does not always want to call a timeout when sometimes it feels like it's necessary. Call a timeout, get your guys in the huddle, and make sure everybody's on the same page in late game situations. Maybe that's a big reason as to why the Boston Celtics are 4-7 this season in overtime games, and Joe Mazzulla does need to take a level of accountability for his team's lackluster play, especially these last couple of weeks post All-Star break. And while I did give credit to the Boston Celtics roster construction and how deep this team is, when you talk about guys like Sam Hauser, Grant Williams, Robert Williams coming back off injury, Al Horford, Malcolm Brogdon, the list goes on. They have a very great roster around their two young superstars and, of course, Marcus Smart. But when I look at the Eastern Conference in general, I cannot just assume that the Boston Celtics, especially with everything I've already listed out, is going to make this year's Eastern Conference Finals or even get to the finals. To me, the Boston Celtics, they're going to lose in the Eastern Conference semifinals this year to either the Milwaukee Bucks or the Philadelphia 76ers. While they are 3-0 this season versus the Sixers, I personally believe that the Sixers have turned the page, turned the corner. The Philadelphia 76ers will beat the Boston Celtics in this year's postseason if they get that matchup. And to kind of wrap up this video, I'm going to throw out one more topic. I'm just going to say right here, right now, that the Boston Celtics, they will not reach this year's Eastern Conference Finals. They are going to lose in the Eastern Conference semifinals this season. Whoever they match up with, and it's most likely going to be the Philadelphia 76ers, I expect the 76ers to go out there and beat the Boston Celtics in this year's postseason. The East is extremely deep. When I look at teams like the Philadelphia 76ers, like the Milwaukee Bucks, hell, you can never count out playoff Jimmy and the Miami Heat, the Cleveland Cavaliers, the list goes on. Even the New York Knicks have the Boston Celtics number. There are teams that when you play physical, aggressive defense and you get up in their grill, you can disrupt the Boston Celtics. But when you play physical defense and you really get up in their grill, you can get and disrupt the Boston Celtics offensive flow. They do not have one of the fastest paces of play in basketball, and I truly believe that this team is vulnerable. Jason Tatum needs to do a better job stepping up in the clutch, and also Joe Mazzulla's rookie struggles are probably going to show in the postseason when it matters the most, in a team and a coach who is proven can go out there and schematically try to attack the Boston Celtics in a 7-game series. The Celtics are still a great team. Jason Tatum's still a top 5 player, and I believe in the roster construction around their team. This is the deepest team in basketball in my eyes. But I see too many flaws and I see too much vulnerability with this Boston Celtics team. They are going to lose in the Eastern Conference semifinals this season. That's just my 2 cents on it. But Celtics fans, NBA fans, I want to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. Let me know, do you guys think that the Celtics are going to fail in this year's postseason? Let me know, where do you guys actually see the Celtics going in this year's postseason? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. But if you guys enjoyed today's video, man, make sure you guys drop me a thumbs up. It takes 1 second and it helps bring the channel out tremendously. And if you guys are new here, consider hitting that subscribe bell to stay tuned for more NBA content that I do here on YouTube. And make sure that you guys go follow me on my socials on Twitter, Instagram, and on TikTok. I'm very active and I'm on there every single day. The link tree will be in the description down below so that you guys can go check that out. But thanks again for sticking around throughout the whole video. Brett James, aka BJ, I'm out, y'all. Peace.